Oh, hey. I didn't see you there. I was just grinding solo Overwatch 2 tank in ranked. You know what's worse than that? Having a dungeon master permanently give your character a hip injury that halves his movement speed in the first session of the campaign. And that's not even halfway down our iceberg today. This is a Dungeons & Dragons horror story.
Okay, look, before I get into this video, I can already see some of your comments about how I'm gatekeeping the hobby and how I'm being mean to a new player when I should be being constructive. All I'm going to ask you guys is to hold that judgment until the end of the video. We tried being constructive with all this, and that didn't work, so now we're here. This D&D horror story is bad, and a lot worse than just a new dungeon master making a couple oopsies. So if you get to the end of the video and you still feel that way, let me have it. Alright, let's do it. Look, I know you want the tea. Give me 45 seconds to set the scene before we get into the story. And I know you're fighting against your TikTok brain rot attention span. I'm gonna put some Subway Surfers right here for you just to help you get through it. So I met Kevin through my girlfriend and her coworkers because they were all starting a D&D group. So I blame everything that happens for the rest of this video on them. They decided to start a D&D campaign and I kind of just got sucked into it because I'm the biggest nerd that any of my friends know. It's just kind of how my life is. I had initially offered to be the dungeon master because I have the super duper forever DM curse, but Kevin jumped in and said, no, I would like to DM, which I thought was splendid. I rolled out my character, which definitely wasn't a College of Swords bard based off of Sai the Sword Swallower. Disgustingly good Ren Fair act, by the way. If you ever have the chance, see them immediately. And with our characters made, we were off to the races. Now, Kevin did tell me that he didn't have a lot of DM experience, but I was totally okay with that. I told him that if he had any questions or needed any advice, I was a resource there for him, and we were ready to go. Again, at this point, I am 110% on board with a new player being a DM. I didn't want to backseat DM him at all, I just wanted to be a resource in case he needed it. So, where did everything go wrong? We're gonna bust out the trusty iceberg chart. We're gonna be putting a lot of fun incidents on this iceberg chart. And yes, it is supposed to be an iceberg. I know I kind of made it look like a guy with Scene Kid hair from the early 2000s. Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you. Sorry about that, it wasn't a phase. If you haven't seen an iceberg chart before, towards the top we're gonna put smaller incidents that I could gloss over that aren't that diabolical. And then down towards the bottom, we're gonna put some really fun and interesting incidents that are sort of catastrophic to the Dungeons & Dragons experience. I'm gonna put all these incidents on the board, and we're gonna go through one by one and reveal all of the really fun and cool things that occurred during this D&D campaign. Starting with our most innocuous point, some really questionable homebrewing. Look, I love homebrewing in Dungeons & Dragons. Adding a new subclass, making your own magic items, using monsters that aren't just straight out of the monster manual. These are all wonderful ways to make your D&D experience fresh and unique to your group. But a quick tip for the new dungeon masters out there, if you don't really understand how D&D works to begin with, you actually don't need to fully overhaul and rewrite the rules from the ground up before your first session. I don't know very much about American football. When I go over to the Super Bowl party, I'm just there for the chips and dip, and you better stay away from my dip. But what Kevin did to the game of D&D feels like if I was allowed to rewrite the rules of football and I took the offensive line out of the game. I think that it would make the game more interesting for me to watch, but anybody who actually cared about the sport would combust and explode watching the travesty that I had created. Basically, Kevin's main issue with Dungeons & Dragons was the initiative system. We're just gonna ignore for a moment that he thought rogues were OP, so he wanted to just take sneak attack out of the game, and that he thought that spellcasters were OP, so he considered just making magic not exist in his world. This was also after we had made our characters and had 2 full spellcasters in the party. He was just going to Thanos snap magic out of existence. I said I was going to ignore this part, so we're just going to move on. Kevin wanted to replace the initiative system with action points so that anybody could spend their action points at any time and we all just sort of shared our turn order. What determined the priority of action point usage? I have no idea. And I did ask him because I thought maybe he has an idea. He did not either. My best guess of how that situation would have gone is sort of like when people are at the stock exchange and everybody's yelling all at once trying to buy and sell stocks and there's absolutely no order to anything, which really just looks like a wonderful role-playing experience all around.
Now for this one, I do have to give Kevin a little bit of credit, because after a few days of talking, and me showing him that I could make a level 5 fighter that could make 17 attacks a round under his action point system, he did decide to scrap this idea and stick with more or less the core rules of Dungeons and Dragons. This is one of the last times I'm going to be giving Kevin credit in this video. And now we're going to our first session and our next point on the iceberg graph. Next up on the D&D iceberg of tomfoolery, we're gonna dip our toes just below the water here. Trust me, the water's fine. And we're gonna get into our starting locations. Taverns, adventuring guilds, prisons. All of these are wonderful places for your D&D party to meet and form a party. Mostly because of one big reason: your party is all there to meet and form the party. So tell me why our campaign starting locations looked like this. Those are not even in the same city or the same nation. These are on different continents. Having several thousand miles between your adventurers and potentially an ocean does make it sort of hard for the party to form up and form a party. And I know that there are ways to make starting in different locations work. If you do a session 0 with each player beforehand, where that character gets to develop their own cool narrative for how they made it to the beginning of the campaign, that's awesome. That sounds wonderful and lovely and terrific, and I would love to do that someday. What doesn't sound lovely, wonderful, or terrific is that this was not a session 0 situation. This was a session 1 situation, and a session 2 situation, and a session 3 situation, and we did not form our full adventuring party until the end of session 5. Playing bi-weekly, that is 2 months of Dungeons and Dragons, where I showed up every other Thursday night to watch other people play Dungeons and Dragons for 75% of the evening. Now, right now, I can see some of you lighting your torches and grabbing your pitchforks, because this is a mistake that would be reasonable for a new dungeon master to make. Here I am, rocking out with the elitist opinions again, pretending that you're not allowed to make a few oopsie poopsies as a new dungeon master. When Kevin reached out for advice about the campaign, and he told me about this, I told him it was not the best idea. I said in the most plain terms I possibly could that I had concerns about starting the party on different continents. Kevin assured me that the party would be all together and joined up by the start of session 2, which we now know was not a fact. I did let him run with this because I was really concerned about being a backseat DM for this whole campaign. But if I'm sitting in the back of the car and the driver steers the car directly towards a lake with alligators in it, and the alligators are building a bomb, at some point I do fear that a little bit of backseat driving becomes acceptable. Although at this point I was still too afraid of being the bad guy to backseat drive at all. And maybe if I had grabbed the steering wheel just a little bit, we could have avoided the rest of this iceberg, but we did not, so let's keep going. This is an awfully big piece of cardboard for 1 point, isn't it? Our next iceberg incident is a really cool, awesome, unwinnable fight, session 1, that left my character with a permanent hip injury. Alright, look, this one's a little bit of a personal gripe, but it's my video, and I can gripe if I want to, and you are powerless to stop me. I want to get just a couple facts straight on this point. I was playing a tiefling bard who had lived in the area he started the campaign in for 24 years. 24 years of his life living in this area of the world, okay? So tell me why, in the first session of our campaign, my tiefling bard walks into a town that he grew up next to and is immediately attacked by the city guard, because the entire nation he grew up in is so racist towards tieflings that they are to be killed on sight. Again, I've lived here as a tiefling for 24 years. I'm gonna ignore just for a second that racism in D&D is a contentious topic all in its own right, and I know that my bard had an intelligence score of 8. There is simply no universe where he forgot that the entire nation he lived in tries to kill him on sight anytime he is seen. When I asked Kevin after the session, hey, what was up with that? His explanation was that it was my fault for not remembering that he wanted to create a gritty and realistic fantasy world. You know what? Oopsie poopsies on me, man. That honestly, you got me. So right, my bard, level 1, ends up in combat with the entire town guard because they are trying to take my head off my shoulders. This is not Skyrim. I am not winning this fight. Thankfully, Kevin does, in his infinite mercy and wisdom, realize how bad this situation is and take pity on my poor level 1 mortal soul. Instead of being permakilled at level 1 in the first 30 minutes of the campaign, he decided instead to just inflict a permanent injury on my character and allow me to escape. So my bard was shot in the hip with a crossbow, shattering his hip socket and reducing his movement speed to 15 for the rest of the campaign. On session 1. Side note, how do you not shoot me in the knee at least so that I can make arrow to the knee jokes? That's not really part of the D&D horror story, I'm just saying. Like, how do you fumble that? I would also like to point out, again, I am a bard. I can cast Cure Wounds, and after I escaped, I asked Kevin, hey, can I cast Cure Wounds on the wound on my hip to allow me to not have a movement speed of 15 forever? And I was informed that healing magic only works on temporary injuries and damage. A permanent wound cannot be cured by magic. So just so everybody knows, magical healing is only applicable to ouchies and boo-boos. Next time you get a paper cut, make sure you have a cleric on standby to use the power of God to cure your paper cut, because that is all it's good for. Anyways, this is my personal gripe with this section of the horror story over with. But I do just want to reiterate, at this point, I was still absolutely trying to help Kevin find his way through DMing for the first time. Dungeon mastering is very hard and daunting when you first get into it, and I don't intend for this video to make anybody embarrassed or ashamed or nervous about dungeon mastering for their first time. During all of this, the whole party was giving Kevin very polite feedback and being very nice about everything because oopsies do happen. So we're gonna get into the next point of our iceberg, which is the single thing we gave him the most feedback about and yet never changed. We're getting pretty deep down here on the iceberg now. Let's get into our next point. Dude, just write a book. One of the most wonderful things about D&D is the amount of freedom that you have in the game. In video games, you are generally limited to only 1 or 2 options, but in Dungeons & Dragons, you are allowed to invent a third, infinitely worse option and pour your heart and soul into trying to make that worst option a reality. And yes, the option is allowed to be worse. It usually is. But that freedom is what makes the game worth playing. You are allowed to build an expressive character and then immerse them into a world where you can express them however you see fit. So, if a dungeon master actively scripts out every single action he expects a character to make for the entire session, and he gets mad at the party when they are not acting exactly as he expected them to act, that kind of sort of takes some of the fun out of playing Dungeons & Dragons. I would argue even that it sucks buns. As an aside, this is the explanation that Kevin gave us as to why it took us 5 sessions for our party to meet. He had scripted out us meeting by session 1, but we didn't take the exact optimal speedrunner strats to make it to the starting city, because we were messing around trying to buy apples and getting killed by the town guard, I guess. That's honestly our bad for not reading his mind and knowing the exact speedrunner strats we were supposed to use to make it to the city. Now, you're probably saying right now, come on, Tater, the scripting couldn't have been that bad, right? And you're probably also saying something like, every dungeon master has to railroad things a little bit every once in a while. It's just kind of the nature of the game. Come with me for a second and let me paint you a beautiful picture with words about the worst scripting incident we had. I'm also going to use a whiteboard to paint the picture because I'm bad with words. This isn't really its own incident on the iceberg, I'm kind of just tacking it on to the book one, but level 4.5 is the chase sequence. Welcome to the chase sequence. This is going to get a little messy, so lock in with me here, okay? This is on session 5 of the campaign, and this is the first time that all of the party members are meeting up together. I'm only saying that to establish that this is session 5. This is after 4 full sessions of us trying to gentle parent Kevin into stopping scripting out the session so freaking much. Yes, we've been communicating that since the first session, and no, it has not been effective at all. So, our heroes meet in the city square. My character and my girlfriend's character are, Committing crimes. This is something that was a part of our character dynamics when we gave Kevin our backstory. I am the charismatic rogue who gets on stage and does some sort of fancy sword swallowing routine, and then the rogue goes around and picks people's pockets while they're distracted. The rest of the party is, they're in the crowd getting fleeced. This is how our party is meeting for the first time, and this is how Kevin had scripted us meeting in the first session. It just took us 2 extra months of gameplay before we got to this point. We start off with the rogue getting caught pickpocketing in the crowd. Now, what role was that made off of? Sleight of hand would be the correct option, although Kevin's a new DM, so let's give him some grace. Stealth might make sense, deception even maybe. Put your guess in the comments right now. You're all wrong. Absolutely no role was made here. When Kevin's script said it was time for the rogue to be caught pickpocketing, all of the townsfolk immediately became omniscient and knew exactly who had been stealing from them. You know, as groups of townsfolk are known to do. Now, obviously, when faced with an omniscient throng of commoners, our rogue decided to run, and 2 of our party members chased after the rogue. Now, this is all part of Kevin's grand design, so things are going well, right? The wrong party members chased after the rogue, you absolute goofball. We were supposed to know which party members were supposed to chase the rogue because the chase sequence had been scripted out so that the paladin had to use Misty Step to catch the rogue, and since the paladin stayed here and these 2 party members ran off, they didn't have Misty Step for the chase sequence, and so the chase sequence wouldn't work. To be honest, we're the idiots for not foreseeing this and understanding exactly what needed to happen. Kevin did say that we should have known the paladin was supposed to chase the rogue because the paladin had Misty Step, so their movement speed was faster, so that's exactly what would have made sense. Because as you know, every D&D party always acts optimally under all circumstances. So our rogue gets chased off. The chase sequence happens off over there and it's a disaster, but to be honest, I don't remember it because I had checked out. But what about my dashing sword-swallowing bard? He wasn't the one caught pickpocketing, so I figured he has no connection to the rogue that the townsfolk know of, so I'm gonna try to talk my way out of this situation. Again, this is on me for being an idiot. The townsfolk are omniscient. I should have known that they would instantly know that I was connected to the rogue. So town guards started coming towards me, and I was determined to use my deception to get out of the situation, and the interaction looked something like this. So, Mateo, which direction did you want to run off in? Oh, I was actually hoping to stay and talk my way out of this situation. I would like to roll for deception maybe once the guards get here. Okay, the guards are coming towards you. You still have a chance to run. I haven't been seen associating with the thief, right? I think that I can talk my way out of this. Okay, but the guards aren't going to listen to you, and they're getting close. You still have a chance to run. They're not going to listen to me? Can I make a check or anything? Or is that just, No, the guards aren't going to listen to you. You still have a chance to run, though. The guards are almost to you. Now seems like a really awesome time to remind you lovely viewers that my movement speed is halved from my broken freaking hip. My brother in Saluna, I literally cannot run away even if I wanted to. Then we had this really awesome moment of like plot-based advantage because the paladin grappled me and I was trying to act like I was innocent still, so I didn't attempt to resist the grapple. But Kevin told me that I needed to roll to resist the grapple just by the rules of the game. I failed and was grappled, and then Kevin just sort of went, just go ahead and roll again. And I was like, okay. And I rolled again, and I didn't break out of the grapple, and Kevin went, you can have advantage, go ahead and roll again. And then I broke out of the grapple. All that was just because Kevin still wanted me to run away. The paladin grappling me would have been an issue for that, and so I just got double plot-based advantage for absolutely no reason. As I stated, this was session 5, and we had still not met up as a full party in an adventuring capacity yet. So at the end of this, we just kind of decided to break character for a moment and go, oh, we all met up at the same part of the city all of a sudden. I guess we're all here now. And so, despite our little PvP spat, we decided to set aside our differences and pursue our common goals. Our common goal, which was, we're almost down at the bottom of the iceberg here. And then we've got one really small final point to get to that probably isn't a huge gripe. But before we get there, Drake, where's the plot? I know that Drake from Drake and Josh is an individual of not so good character these days, but I wanted to use the meme, okay? You can't fault me for that. Now, look, I've seen the memes about players ignoring plot hooks, and all the Reddit posts of dungeon masters not knowing how to get their characters to actually pursue the plot because the characters keep getting distracted by chasing around goblins in a field, alright? So I need you to know that when I say the following, I am a forever DM. I understand the struggles, and I genuinely try to help my dungeon masters keep the party on track at any point that I possibly can. I could not, for the life of me, tell you a single plot point, important NPC, or quest throughout this entire campaign we played. We played for a grand total of 15 or 16 sessions, and I genuinely don't even know where the start of the storyline was. According to Kevin, when we broke character and just decided we were just gonna meet up by force, we met up at the wrong part of the city, and so we missed an important plot NPC and never got to be given the beginning quest of our adventure. Which can happen in D&D from time to time, but we tried to find a quest. By session 10, my character was literally walking up to townsfolk, grabbing them by the scruff of their shirt, and shaking them down, saying, "Hey, have you heard of any quests that a group of level 3 adventurers could go on together?" And when they said no, I would just go to the next commoner and shake them down. This was genuinely just so baffling to me as a player. We would be in a tavern and Kevin would go, "So, what do you guys do next?" And we literally wouldn't have an answer because we had already interrogated every single person in that tavern and that section of the city for any rumors that could lead us to anything to do. At some point around session 13, we ended up on some weird side tangent where we were trying to prove that a horse derby track owner was cheating on his wife, so we were trying to get a prostitute to tell us what his wee-wee looked like. But that wasn't even part of a main quest line. We only got there because we were pursuing something from one of our party members' backstories that wasn't a part of the main plot. And buddy, I promise you, I tried to communicate this to Kevin. I even directly asked him, "Hey man, I feel like we're not really getting anywhere campaign-wise. Is there anything you want me to do to help prompt us to move towards your storyline?" But by this point in the campaign, Kevin had gotten insanely frustrated with us because he was under the impression that we were intentionally derailing his campaign and avoiding the plot hooks that he was setting out for us. I guess that's my bad for not stealing his DM notes and looking through them to know exactly where we were supposed to go to start our grand adventure. But now I do fear it is time for us to get to the bottom of the iceberg. Thank you for being here with me. It means a lot. Our final point on our iceberg today. I'm going to read this in a way that won't be emotionally charged. Why are you so arrogant about this? You literally have never played this game and nobody is having any fun. Take the tiniest bit of constructive criticism, please. Yeah, this is the bottom. If you're still here and watching, you're very wonderful and amazing. Because me subjecting you to this D&D horror story might not be worth the 0.08 cents of ad revenue that I am getting from it. Everything above this on the iceberg, honestly, I think that I could excuse. If the train had stopped at the last station and this story had ended there, I don't think I would be making this video. I think I might even still be playing D&D with Kevin and trying to help him navigate the absolute mess that is being a dungeon master for the first time. Seriously, DMing is so daunting, and I respect anybody and everyone who puts on the silly little DM hat. But where I just have to draw a line as far as being understanding is when you completely refuse to have any conversation about how the campaign is going or take any constructive criticism on how you're running the campaign. Because I mean this in the most honest way possible. Cast a zone of truth upon me, smite me if I am lying. We tried to be constructive with Kevin about all of this. Every member of our party tried to communicate it with him, and it was not in a, "Hey dummy, you're so bad at dungeon mastering, you should never do this again" kind of way. It was stuff like, "Hey Kevin, when the NPCs grope our paladin, it makes her feel a little uncomfortable. Could we change that?" Or, "Hey man, when you script out every session and get frustrated with us for not following your script, that just kind of ruins the experience for everyone." Or, "Hey, we don't really have any direction in this campaign right now. Do you have anything you need us to do to get the main quest line started?" Again, zone of truth upon me. I did my best to be constructive. And this is coming from somebody who had to work with Nathan for a few months after the affair came out. I can have a civil conversation with someone who I am frustrated with. I promise. But Kevin just had this magical superpower that I am envious of that was just an impervious shield against all forms of taking accountability or feeling responsible for anything. We weren't finding the quest lines because we weren't smart enough to understand what we should be doing, and so we were missing important NPCs. The NPCs were groping the paladin because he was trying to create a gritty and realistic fantasy setting, and that's just how fantasy has to be, I guess. He wasn't scripting the sessions, he was just assuming that we wouldn't be morons and that we would make intelligent choices, as he said. And all of this went on for 15 sessions. That is 30 weeks of this loop repeating the entire time. Do you see where all of this just starts to cross a little tiny bit of a line for me and become something that I'm not willing to write off as a new DM oopsies? I can completely understand any one of the mistakes on this iceberg, or all of the mistakes on this iceberg, being something that's just growing pains for a new DM, and that's completely acceptable. But when you decide that you are above the rest of the party and it doesn't matter what they want because you're smarter than them and you know how to make a good D&D campaign regardless of how they feel about it, I do not say this lightly, but refusing to communicate with your party and refusing to acknowledge what they want out of D&D is one of the only things in this world I will say makes you a bad dungeon master. And at that point, I am going to make a YouTube video and flame you over it. On a side note, Kevin is afraid of YouTube's privacy policy because I think he thinks that if he logs into YouTube, the government will get his address and send a team of assassins to his house or something. I don't really know. I don't remember the details of why he didn't like the privacy policy. But I'm pretty sure we're safe from him seeing this video, and even if we're not, I am not using his real name because I don't want to put anyone on blast quite like that except for Nathan. Just in case you're not convinced that all of this is warranted still though, I have prepared a brief bonus round of rapid fire points just to really punctuate that this was truly a Dungeons & Dragons horror story. Bonus sadness round of things that Kevin did that made me sad in Dungeons & Dragons. Let's go. Called us slurs when we tried to give him criticism. And yes, they're probably the slurs you're thinking of. Literally every NPC was a racist and sexist old man. This really isn't how your fantasy world needs to be to make it feel realistic. You can have a fun but realistic fantasy world. The groping, I kind of glossed over that, but our paladin was getting groped like 3 times a session by NPCs. And I just don't understand why you feel the need to narrate that 3 times a night. Texting a party member completely unprompted, telling her that she didn't understand feminism and that it hurt his feelings. I have no commentary about this. This is just a crazy thing to do. He invited his girlfriend to the campaign, openly talked about wanting to sleep with other people in front of her, and then just kind of bullied her until she quit playing with us. And we all kind of just had to sit there and watch that, so that was fun. At least he wasn't Nathan, though. And then at the end, he faked moving to another city to get out of the group. He said he was moving like 2 hours away and said, "Oh, I can't DM for you guys anymore, sorry." And then one of our players ran into him at a coffee shop still working up here, so that was awkward. Pretty good bonus round list, am I right? But I guess to give this all one more positive note, my first roll of the campaign was to see if I could pee into the wind strong enough that the wind wouldn't blow my pee back onto me. So honestly, I think it all weighs out to be pretty much even. Alright, that's the full horror story. If you still feel like I'm unjustified in flaming Kevin like this, go ahead and leave your comment. I appreciate you at least hearing me out. But if you're still here because you enjoyed it, then thank you very much for that too. And go ahead and send this to a new DM so they don't feel quite as bad about their first time dungeon mastering. I guarantee you, no matter how bad your first time DMing is, it's not going to be as bad as this. And Kevin, if you're watching this, dude, YouTube has terrible cybersecurity. The government has your address and they're gonna send a drone to your house or something. Or whatever you're afraid of. I really don't know. Anyways, I love you all. I appreciate the support. And, yeah. This is the first D&D horror story. Bye. I should close this.